Why would the honeybee genome be important?
The honeybee, Apis mellifera, is a major pollinator of crops and is a social insect, making it significant for basic research on insects.
Is DNA always double-stranded?
At temperatures greater than 176 degrees Fahrenheit 80 degrees Celsius, eukaryotic DNA will become single-stranded. Single-stranded eukaryotic DNA does not always have the characteristic secondary helical structure. Single-stranded DNA can form a hairpin, stem, or a cross. Certain viruses have only single-stranded DNA.
What are the essential nutrient elements required for plant growth?
Essential nutrients are chemical elements that are necessary for plant growth. An element is essential for plant growth when, 1. It is required for a plant to complete its life cycle. To produce viable seeds, 2. It is part of a molecule or component of the plant that is itself essential to the plant, such as the magnesium in the chlorophyll molecule. And 3. The plant displays symptoms of deficiency in the absence of the element. Essential nutrients are also referred to as essential minerals and essential inorganic nutrients.
What is the most specialized cell in mammals?
Depending on the criteria you choose. Several types of cells could be nominated as the most specialized cell in the mammalian body. The two top candidates for this honor would probably be, 1. The cells that produce gametes, sperm and eggs, 2. The red blood cells that carry oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Red blood cells are perhaps the most highly specialized. They only live for roughly 120 days. But during that time they may travel more than 500 miles 800 kilometers through various organs and blood vessels. Red blood cells lack a nucleus, so they are unable to reproduce. New cells are formed in bone marrow.
What prevents urine from leaking out of the bladder and getting into the body?
The cells that form your bladder are held together by tight junctions, which are connections between cells that hold them together so closely that urine can't slip through to reach the rest of the body. These connections, formed by protein strands that bind the cell membranes, also play an important role in keeping food in the digestive tract until it has been completely processed.
What is Starlink corn?
Starlink is a bioengineered corn variety that was genetically modified to include a gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, Bt, which produces a protein, called an endotoxin, that kills some types of insects. Bt endotoxin has been registered as a biopesticide in the United States since 1961. And the Bt endotoxin has been used by organic farmers for biological pest control. The endotoxins only become activated in the guts of susceptible insects. Because of the significant losses to corn crops caused by the European corn borer, scientists targeted the corn plant itself as a candidate for insertion of the Bt gene.
How deep does the root system penetrate the soil?
The depth to which the root system penetrates the soil is dependent on moisture, temperature, the composition of the soil, and specific plant. Most of the roots actively absorbing water and minerals. The feeder roots are found in the upper 3 feet 1 meter of the soil. The feeder roots of many trees are mainly in the upper 6 in 15 centimeters of the soil, the part of the soil richest in organic matter.
How fast does a hummingbird's wing move?
Hummingbirds are the only family of birds that can truly hover in still air for any length of time. They need to do so in order to hang in front of a flower while they perform the delicate task of inserting their slim sharp bills into the flower's depths to drink nectar. Their thin wings are not contoured into the shape of aerofoils and do not generate lift in this way. Their paddle-shaped wings are, in effect, hands that swivel at the shoulder. They beat them in such a way that the tip of each wing follows the line of a figure 8 lying on its side. The wing moves forward and downward into the front loop of the 8, creating lift. As it begins to come up and goes back, the wing twists through 180 degrees so that once again it creates a downward thrust. The hummingbird's method of flying does have a major limitation. The smaller a wing, the faster it has to beat in order to produce sufficient downward thrust. An average-sized hummingbird beats its wings 25 times a second. The bee hummingbird, native to Cuba, is only 2 in 5 centimeters long and beats its wings at an astonishing 200 times a second.
What groups of reptiles are living today?
The 3 orders of reptiles that are alive today are, 1. Chelonia, which includes turtles, terrapins, and tortoises, 2. Squamata, which includes lizards and snakes, and 3. Crocodilia, which includes crocodiles and alligators.
Why are islands a good place to study evolution?
Island populations tend to be reproductively isolated from the mainland. Therefore, they are more likely to demonstrate adaptations that are particular to that island's ecology. This provides researchers an opportunity to study not only how natural selection works on populations but also what forces may be at work on the mainland populations as well.
What is flow cytometry?
Flow cytometry is an exciting new biotechnology method in which single cells or subcellular fractions flowing past a light source are scanned based on measurement of visible or fluorescent light emission. The cells can be sorted into different fractions depending on fluorescence emitted by each droplet. Flow cytometry can be used to identify particular cell types such as malignant cells or immune cells such as T or B cells. High-throughput screening is a large-scale automated search of a genome in order to determine how a cell or larger biological system uses its genetic information to create a specific product or total organism. The term platform is used to describe all components needed for high-throughput screening.
How many kinds of sharks are there and how many are dangerous?
The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization lists 354 species of sharks, ranging in length from 6 in, 15 centimeters, to 49 feet 15 meters. While 35 species are known to have attacked humans at least once, only a dozen do so on a regular basis. The relatively rare great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, is the largest predatory fish. The largest specimen accurately measured was 20 feet, 4 in, 6.2 m, long and weighed 5,000 pounds 2,270 kilograms.
What are the special challenges of producing effective antifungal drugs?
Since fungi are eukaryotic, their cellular structure is similar to, if not the same as, that of animals and humans. Drugs that affect metabolic pathways in fungi often affect corresponding pathways in host cells, which can result in the host sustaining drug toxicity. Many antifungal drugs can only be used topically. Very few drugs have been found to be selectively toxic, that is, toxic to fungi and not their human hosts.
How do skin cells keep your blood from leaking out?
The skin is comprised of multiple layers of cells. The outermost layers are made of dead cells full of keratin. Sebaceous glands coat these dead cells with an oily secretion that makes them water resistant. However, they are not waterproof. About 1 pint of fluid from deeper tissues leaks through the skin's surface every day and evaporates. This excretion is in addition to perspiration produced by excessive heat or strenuous activity. The very strong junctions holding the cells together, known as desmosomes, prevent large amounts of fluid leakage across the skin barrier. The linkages are so efficient that the epidermal skin cells tend to slough off in sheets rather than individually.
What kinds of behavior do protozoans exhibit?
Protozoans react to changes in their immediate environment. But there is no evidence for any type of learning. For example, paramecia will avoid a strong chemical or physical stimulus by turning to locate an escape route. An example of a negative stimulus is cool water, which paramecia will swim away from since they prefer warmer temperatures.
What is macroevolution?
Macroevolution is large-scale change that can generate entire new groups of related species, also known as a clade. One example would be the movement of plants onto land. All terrestrial plants are descended from that event, which occurred during the Devonian period 400 million years ago.
What is the function of centrioles in animal cells?
Centrioles both assemble and organize long, hollow cylinders of protein known as microtubules. They are also known as microtubule organizing centers, MTOCs.
Why was the Darwin-Wallace theory so ridiculed?
The work of Darwin and Wallace generated controversy on at least two fronts. First, their theory directly countered Christian teaching on the immutability of species and their special creation by God. Second, by presenting arguments for common descent. Darwin and Wallace showed that humans were related to other animals, apes in particular. This insulted those who felt that humans were unique and not part of the animal kingdom. However, it should be noted that as the work was disseminated among scientists, it gained general acceptance in the late decades of the 19th century.
How fast is DNA copied?
In prokaryotes, about 1,000 nucleotides can be copied per second. So all of the 4.7 MB of Escherichia coli can be copied in about 40 minutes. Since the eukaryotic genome is immense compared to the prokaryotic genome, one might think that the eukaryotic DNA replication would take a very long time. However, actual measurements show that the chromosomes in Eukaryotes have multiple replication sites per chromosome. Eukaryotic cells can replicate about 500 bases per minute. The actual time to copy the entire genome would depend on the size of their genome.
What animals have been studied for play behavior?
Coyotes, wolves, and dogs, all canids, have been studied extensively for comparisons of play behavior patterns. Neither dogs, specifically beagles, nor wolves showed agonistic behavior during play. In comparison, coyotes showed high levels of agonistic behavior throughout a comparable developmental period. Coyotes usually established dominance in a pack by fighting at an early age. How is BF?
Do migrating animals actually have magnetic crystals in their brains?
Scientists have long speculated that birds may have magnetic compasses that allow them to detect the Earth's magnetic field and thus determine directions. Experiments in which magnets were strapped to the heads of pigeons caused the birds to become disoriented. Although magnetic iron has been found in bacteria and a variety of animal tissues, none has been clearly linked with a magnetic sense.
How many different animals are there?
Biologists have described and named more than 1 million species of animals. And some biologists believe that there are several million to 10 million more species that remain to be discovered, classified, and named.
What is Gray's manual?
Gray's Manual of Botany, first published in 1848 by Asa Gray, 1810 to 1888, under the title Manual of the Botany of Northern United States, was the first accurate and modern guide to the plants of eastern North America. The publication contained keys and thorough descriptions of plants. The 8th, and centennial, edition was largely rewritten and expanded by Merritt Lyndon Fernald. 1873 to 1950, and published in 1950. This edition was corrected and updated by R.C. Rollins and reprinted in 1987 by Dioscorides Press.
How do plant cells use carbon dioxide?
Plant cells reduce carbon dioxide to sugar by using the electrons that are produced when chlorophyll absorbs light. 6 carbon dioxide, CO2, molecules, along with 6 water H2O, molecules, can be converted into a simple sugar, C6H12O6.
What members of Cnidaria are economically important?
Reef-building corals are among the most important members of Cnidaria. Coral reefs are among the most productive of all ecosystems. They are large formations of calcium carbonate. Limestone, in tropical seas laid down by living organisms over thousands of years. Fishes and other animals associated with reefs provide an important source of food for humans. And reefs serve as tourist attractions. Many terrestrial organisms also benefit from coral reefs, which form and maintain the foundation of thousands of islands. By providing a barrier against waves, reefs also protect shorelines against storms and erosion.
Who first discovered the link between genetics and metabolic disorders?
Archibald Garrod, 1857 to 1936, was a British physician who became interested in a rare but harmless disease called alkaptonuria. A unique characteristic of this condition is that the patient's urine turns black when exposed to air. Previously, physicians thought the disorder was due to a bacterial infection. However, Garrod observed that the disorder was more common in children of first cousin marriages and followed the Mendelian description of an autosomal recessive disease. Garrod, a follower of the fledgling science of biochemistry, suspected that the urine turned dark because patients lacked the enzyme to break down the protein that caused the urine to darken. He referred to alkaptonuria as an inborn error of metabolism. Unfortunately, very few people understood metabolic pathways at that time. So his contributions remained largely unnoticed. By the 1950s his work was verified, earning Garrod the title of Father of Chemical Genetics.
How does one prepare a 110 dilution?
A 110 dilution means 1 part in a total of 10. There are 3 different ways to prepare a 110 dilution. 1. The weight-to-weight, WW method, 2. The weight-to-volume, WV method, and 3. The volume-to-volume, VV method. In the weight-to-weight method, 1.0 g of solute is dissolved in 9.0 g of solvent, yielding a total of 10 parts by weight, one of which is solute. In the weight-to-volume method, enough solvent is added to 1.0 g of solute to make a total volume of 10 ml. In this method, 1 part, by weight, is dispersed in 10 total parts, by volume. Since most biological solutions are very dilute, the accuracy of most research is not affected if a previously weighed solute is dissolved in the desired volume of solvent. The volume-to-volume method is preferred when the solute is a liquid. 1 milliliter of solute, such as ethanol, added to 9.0 ml of water yields a 10-part solution, 1 part of which is the solute.
Who was the first individual to study animal behavior?
Aristotle, 384 to 322 b. CE, wrote 10 volumes on the natural history of animals. The Roman naturalist Pliny, 23 to 79 CE, also extensively observed and recorded observations of organisms in his book Natural History. In more recent times Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, recorded in his journal, the behavior of the marine iguanas of the Galapagos Islands. Darwin also published a book, The Expression of the Emotions of Man and Animals, 1872, in which he showed how natural selection would favor specialized behavioral patterns for survival. However, it was not until 1953, when Nico Tinbergen, 1907 to 1988, documented and published his studies of gulls, the herring gull's world, and their begging techniques, that the field of ethology, the study of animal behavior, was established.
What is the origin of the name Jimson weed?
Jimson weed, Datura stramonium, is a corruption of the name Jamestown weed. The colonists of Jamestown, Virginia, were familiar with this weed. It is also known as thorn apple, mad apple, stinkwort, angel's trumpet, devil's trumpet, stinkweed, 188 tutri, and white man's weed. Even when consumed in moderate amounts, every part of this plant is poisonous and potentially deadly. Even so, some of the alkaloids found in this plant are used by doctors as a pre-anesthetic.
Are any other animals able to drink seawater?
Birds and reptiles that live near the sea are also able to drink seawater. These animals have nasal salt glands near their eyes through which they excrete the excess quantities of salt solution.
Why is it necessary to fix a biological specimen?
Fixing a biological specimen retains a reasonably good semblance of the object as it appeared when it was alive. It allows the scientists to observe details of the external and internal anatomy of the specimen.
Who first proposed that the cell membrane is composed of a bilayer structure of lipids?
In 1925 Evert Gorter, 1881 to 1954, and F. Grendel, two Dutch physiologists, hypothesized that there is a bilayer structure of lipids on the cell surface. Their work was significant because it was the first attempt to understand membranes at the molecular level.
What is page?
Page, polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis, is a type of separation method in which polyacrylamide, a polymer of acrylamide, is used instead of agarose in the gel bed of the electrophoresis chamber. Polyacrylamide is preferable to agarose because it forms a tighter gel bed that is then capable of separating smaller molecules, especially those with molecular weights that are very similar. Page is used in DNA sequencing, DNA fingerprinting, and for protein separation.
What is ADP?
ADP, adenosine triphosphate, is the universal energy currency of a cell. Its secret lies in its structure. ADP contains 3 negatively charged phosphate groups. When the bond between the outermost 2 phosphate groups is broken, ADP becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate. This reaction releases 7.3 kcal/mol of ADP, which is a great deal of energy by cell standards.
What are some interesting features of jellyfishes?
Jellyfishes live close to the shores of most oceans and spend most of their time floating near the surface. Jellyfishes have bell-shaped bodies that are between 95% and 96% water. They have a muscular ring around the margin of the bell that contracts rhythmically to propel them through the water. Jellyfishes are carnivores, subduing their prey with stinging tentacles and drawing the paralyzed animal into the digestive cavity. Jellyfishes are gelatinous. You can see through their bodies.
In what ways are leaves economically important?
Leaves are used for food and beverages, dyes and fibers, and medicinal and other industrial uses. Certain plants, such as cabbage, Brassica oleracea, lettuce, Lactica sativa, spinach, Spinacia oleracea, and most herbs including parsley, Petroselinum crispum, and thyme, Thymus vulgaris, are grown for their leaves. Berbera leaves, Arctostaphylos uva ursi, contain a natural yellow dye, while henna leaves, Lawsonia inermis, contain a natural red dye. The leaves of palm trees are used to make clothing, brooms, and thatched huts in tropical climates. Aloe leaves, aloe vera, are well known for treating burns and are also used in manufacturing medicated soaps and creams.
Is there a cat that lives in the desert?
The sand cat, Felis margarita, is the only member of the cat family tied directly to desert regions. Found in the deserts of North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and western Pakistan. The sandcat has adapted to extremely arid desert areas. The padding on the soles of its feet is well suited to the loose sandy soil, and it can live without drinking freestanding water. Having sandy or grayish ochre dense fur, its body length is 17.5 to 22 in, 45 to 57 centimeters. Mainly nocturnal, active at night, the cat feeds on rodents, hares, birds, and reptiles. The Chinese desert cat, Felis biota, does not live in the desert as its name implies, but inhabits the steppe country and mountains. Likewise, the Asiatic desert cat, Felis sylvestris ornata, inhabits the open plains of India, Pakistan, Iran, and Asiatic Russia.
Who proposed using magnetic resonance imaging for diagnostic purposes?
The concept of using MRI to detect tumors in patients was proposed by Raymond Damadian. 1936, in a 1972 patent application. The fundamental MRI imaging concept used in all present-day MRI instruments was proposed by Paul Lauterbur. 1929, in an article in Nature in 1973. Lauterbur and Peter Mansfield, 1933. Were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2003 for their discoveries concerning magnetic resonance imaging. The main advantages of MRI are that it not only gives superior images of soft tissues, like organs, but it can also measure dynamic physiological changes in a non-invasive manner, without penetrating the body in any way. A disadvantage of MRI is that it cannot be used for every patient. For example, patients with implants, pacemakers, or cerebral aneurysm clips made of metal cannot be examined using MRI because the machine's magnet could potentially move these objects within the body, causing damage.
Which fungi commonly found in North America have demonstrated beneficial medicinal effects?
Clinical trials have been conducted to test potential health benefits of fungi commonly found in North America. The following chart reveals some of the benefits that several common fungi may provide.
Is obesity inherited?
Genetic clues to obesity have been studied in mice, where at least two genes, obese, OB, and diabetes, DB, have been identified and analyzed. The OB gene codes for the weight-controlling hormone leptin. From the Greek term leptos, meaning slender, which is produced by fat cells. Once leptin is released by fat cells, it travels to the hypothalamus, a specific area of the brain, where it binds to receptors. The DB gene codes for these hypothalamic receptors. Once leptin is bound, it regulates the rate of energy consumption. However, body weight is a complex phenotype, and it is likely that there are more genes to be found that control body weight.
Species commonly used in genetics research. How can one gene control another?
One gene cannot actually control another gene, but one gene can mask the effect of another gene. This is called epistasis. For example, a gene in Labrador dogs controls deposition of melanin. The dominant allele B causes deposition of large amounts of melanin. A recessive allele B causes less deposition. So a BB or BB dog is black, while a BB dog is brown. Another gene controls whether or not melanin is deposited at all. This gene E allows deposition of melanin while the recessive form E does not. Therefore, an EE dog is yellow while an EE or EE dog is not yellow and has melanin. The interaction of two genes, the B and E genes, thus controls coloration in Labrador dogs.
Is aggressive behavior inherited?
Because it is difficult to characterize a phenotype for aggression. More research is needed before specific genes are linked to aggressive behavior.
How is Henry David Thoreau associated with the environment?
Henry David Thoreau, 1817 to 1862, was a writer and naturalist from New England. His most familiar work, Walden, describes the time he spent in a cabin near Walden Pond in Massachusetts. He is also known for being one of the first to write and lecture on the topic of forest succession. His work, along with that of John Muir, 1838 to 1914, and others, has served to inspire those others to understand the natural world and provide for its conservation.
What is hermaphroditism?
Hermaphroditic animals have both male and female reproductive systems. Hermaphroditism provides a means for animals to reproduce sexually without finding mates. For example, individuals in many species of tapeworms fertilize their own eggs. In other species such as earthworms, each individual serves as a male and female during mating, both donating and receiving sperm.
How does external fertilization differ from internal fertilization?
External fertilization is common among aquatic animals including fishes, amphibians, and aquatic invertebrates. Following an elaborate ritual of mating behavior to synchronize the release of eggs and sperm. Both males and females deposit their gametes in the water at approximately the same time in close proximity to each other. The water protects the sperm and eggs from drying out. Fertilization occurs when the sperm reach the eggs. Internal fertilization requires that sperm be deposited in or close to the female reproductive tract. It is most common among terrestrial animals that either lay a shelled egg, such as reptiles and birds, or when the embryo develops for a period of time within the female body.
What are the two most common media to grow bacteria?
Beef extract and peptones, hydrolyzed protein, are the basic ingredients of nutrient broth. These materials supply a variety of carbon sources, nitrogen compounds in the form of amino acids, and a mixture of cofactors such as vitamins. The addition of agar, a complex carbohydrate extracted from seaweed, results in a solid medium. Agar is an ideal solidifying agent for microbiological media because of its melting properties and because it has no nutritive value for the vast majority of bacteria. Solid agar melts at 194 to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 90 to 100 degrees Celsius. Liquid agar solidifies at about 103 degrees Fahrenheit, 42 degrees Celsius.
Which fiber has the longest fiber cells?
Rami, Baemerianavia, has the longest fiber cells with lengths of more than 12 in, 30 centimeters, long. Often used in fabric, these fibers are also stronger than cotton fibers.
In the life cycles of bryophytes, which is dominant, the sporophyte or gametophyte?
In all of the bryophytes, mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, gametophytes are the most conspicuous, dominant phase. A mat of moss consists of haploid gametophytes. Sporophytes are typically smaller and present only part of the time.
What is a wetland?
A wetland is an area that is covered by water for at least part of the year and has characteristic soils and water-tolerant plants. Examples of wetlands include swamps, marshes, bogs, and estuaries.
Who was Darwin's bulldog?
Thomas Huxley, 1825 to 1895, was a staunch supporter of Darwin's work. In fact, Huxley wrote a favorable review of Darwin's On the Origin of Species that appeared soon after its publication. When the firestorm of controversy began after the appearance of Darwin's book, Huxley was ready and able to defend Darwin, whose chronic public reticence about his theories was at that time exacerbated by illness. Huxley's defense of Darwin was so vigorous during a debate with Bishop Samuel Wilberforce, 1805–1873. At the British Association for the Advancement of Science in 1860 that he earned the title Darwin's Bulldog.
How does alcohol affect cell function?
Alcohol causes varying effects on different cells. In general, alcohol increases tissue sensitivity to injury and prevents post-injury recovery. Alcohol stimulates brain cells by disrupting calcium channels within the cell membranes. It is thought that alcohol affects the fluidity of the membrane phospholipids. Alcohol also causes mitochondrial damage, depressed platelet function, decreased synthesis and transportation of proteins from the liver, and the activation of pancreatic enzymes that may subsequently damage the lining of the lung.
What is epigenetics?
Just as the term epidermis refers to the layer of the skin above, or beyond the dermis, the term epigenetics describes non-genetic causes of a phenotype. An example is genetic imprinting.
What is the wobble hypothesis?
It turns out that only the first two nucleotides of the codon and anticodon bond together securely during translation. The flexibility of bonding at the third site, the wobble, allows cells to build only 45 tRNA molecules to cover the 64 possible mRNA codons. By converting an adenine base into a molecule called eosine, the tRNA increases the number of mRNA nucleotides it can match in the third position. This hypothesis was first proposed by James Watson, 1928, and has since been borne out by a number of experiments.
What are the nitrogenous bases of DNA?
The nitrogenous bases have a ring of nitrogen and carbon atoms with various functional groups attached. There are two types of nitrogenous bases. They differ in their structure. Thymine and cytosine have a single ring structure, while adenine and guanine have double ring structures. When Watson and Crick were imagining how the bases would join together, they knew that the pairing had to be such that there was always a uniform diameter for the molecule. It therefore became apparent that a double ring base must always be paired with a single ring base on the opposite strand.
What group of animals was the first to make a partial transition from water to land?
Amphibians have made a partial transition to terrestrial life. The living amphibians include newts, salamanders, frogs, and toads. Although lungfish made a partial transition to living out of the water. Amphibians were the first to struggle onto land and become adapted to a life of breathing air while not constantly surrounded by water.
What is zero population growth?
Zero population growth, or ZPG, is the estimation of the birth rate necessary to maintain the size of the human population at its current level. As of now, the rate is estimated as 2.1, which means that each set of existing parents would need to have, on average, slightly more than 2 children during their lifetime. The extra 0.1 allows for infant mortality.
What is the race for the double helix?
Great minds on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean were intent on finding the structure of DNA. Race for the Double Helix is a BBC TV production, 1986. Based on the research and personal interactions of those who worked on the structure of DNA during the 1950s. The main characters included James Watson, American, 1928, Francis Crick, British, 1916 to 2004. Rosalind Franklin, British, 1920 to 1958, Maurice Wilkins, British, 1916, Peter Pauling, Linus Pauling's son. American, 1931 to 2003, John Randall, British, 1905 to 1984, and Edwin Chargaff, French, 1905 to 2002.
Why is photosynthesis important?
Ultimately, photosynthesis is the process that provides food for the entire world. Each year more than 250 billion metric tons of sugar are created through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a source of food not only for plants, but also all organisms that are not capable of internally producing their own food, including humans.
How does thin layer chromatography differ from other chromatographic techniques?
Thin layer chromatography does not use a column. The stationary phase is thinly coated on a substrate, most frequently a glass plate. A binding agent such as calcium sulfate is electrophoresis has become an important tool in DNA identification, genetic fingerprinting. Usually added to make the adsorbent adhere to the substrate. A sample is placed on the plate and the mobile phase migrates through. The stationary phase by capillary action, similar to paper chromatography. After separation, the spots may be scraped from the glass for detailed analysis. Or they can be subjected to further chromatographic study.
Why are dilution techniques important to biologists?
Dilution techniques provide simple and accurate procedures to 1. Change the concentration of a solution. 2. Indirectly weigh a solute whose weight is significantly below the usual limits of analytical balances, and 3. Determine the quantity of bacteria in a culture.
Do different fungi rot different parts of trees?
Most fungi that rot wood in standing trees are basidiomycetes. The group that includes mushrooms, fleshy shelves, and rigid brackets. Most wood rotters attack only one or two related species of trees. Conifers and deciduous trees are more prone to fungi damage. Many wood rot fungi damage only specific parts of a tree. For example, Ganoderma lucidum and Heterobasidion annosum specifically. Rot roots and are rarely found in higher sections of trees. Sirena unicolor and Climacodon septentrionale are common in high sections of trees and are rarely found in the roots. Laetoporus sulphurus and Fomitopsis pinicola are found in all sections of a tree except the smallest branches of their host.
Can people have missing or extra chromosomes?
Yes, people can live with this chromosomal abnormality. Depending on which chromosomes are copied or missing. Examples of these conditions include Down syndrome, an extra copy of chromosome 21, and Turner syndrome. A female with only one X chromosome, both of which can result in healthy babies. Conversely, almost 1% of all conceptions are triploid. 3 copies of each chromosome, but over 99% of these die before birth.
What important scientific discoveries were made using X-ray diffraction?
In 1951 the protein A helix was discovered by Linus Pauling, 1901 to 1994. X-ray diffraction was used to reveal the double helix structure of DNA in 1953 by Maurice Wilkins. 1916, Francis Crick, 1916 to 2004, Rosalind Franklin, 1920 to 1958, and James Watson, 1928. Dorothy Mary Crowfoot Hodgkin, 1901 to 1994. Used the technique to determine the structure of vitamin B12 in 1956.
What is meant by a jumping gene?
A jumping gene is a gene that can move from one location to another in a chromosome, or can even jump from one chromosome to another. Another name for a jumping gene is a transposon.
What are the two major groups of angiosperms?
Angiosperms made up of the largest number of plant species. 240,000, are classified into two major groups, monocots and dicots. The description of monocots and dicots is based on the first leaves that appear on the plant embryo. Monocots have one seed leaf, while dicots have two seed leaves. There are approximately 65,000 species of monocots and 175,000 species of dicots. Orchids, bamboo, palms, lilies, grains, and many grasses are examples of monocots. Dicots include most trees that are non-coniferous, shrubs, ornamental plants, and many food crops.
What are the major types of bonds?
There are three major types of chemical bonds: covalent, ionic, and hydrogen. The form of bond that is established is determined by a specific arrangement between the electrons. Ionic bonds are formed when electrons are exchanged between two atoms, and the resulting bond is relatively weak. An ionic bond is found in salt. Covalent bonds occur when electrons are shared between atoms. This form of bond is strongest and is found in both energy-rich molecules and molecules essential to life. Hydrogen bonds are temporary, but they are important because they are crucial to the shape of a particular protein and have the ability to be rapidly formed and reformed, as in the case of muscle contraction. The following chart explains the types of bonds and their characteristics.
Is it possible to eliminate fat cells permanently?
Current evidence suggests that the original number of fat cells in any area of the body is controlled by one's genetic makeup. People who lose fat mass through diet and exercise do not lose fat cells. Rather, the fat cells atrophy. Although fat cells may be removed by liposuction, studies have suggested that liposuction does not effectively control weight. Surgical removal of fat cells only removes about 10% or less of fat cells in the body.
What is evolution?
Although it was originally defined in the 19th century as descent with modification, evolution is currently described as the change in frequency of genetic traits, also known as the allelic frequency, within populations over time.
Why are leeches important in the field of medicine?
The medical leech, Hirudo medicinalis, is used to remove blood that has accumulated within tissues as a result of injury or disease. Leeches have also been applied to fingers or toes that have been surgically reattached to the body. The sucking by the leech unclogs small blood vessels, permitting blood to flow normally again through the body part. The leech releases hirudin, secreted by the salivary glands, which is an anticoagulant that prevents blood from clotting and dissolves pre-existing clots. Other salivary ingredients dilate blood vessels and act as an anesthetic. A medicinal leech can absorb as much as 5 to 10 times its body weight in blood. Complete digestion of this blood takes a long time. And these leeches feed only once or twice a year in this manner.
What are the major functions of leaves?
Leaves are the main photosynthetic organ. However, they are also important in gas exchange and water movement throughout the whole plant.
What is speciation?
Speciation is the process by which new species are formed. This occurs when populations become separated from the rest of the species. At this point, the isolated group will respond independently to natural selection until the population becomes reproductively isolated. The group is then considered a new species.
What characteristics distinguish a leaf from a leaflet?
The two criteria used to distinguish a leaf from a leaflet are: 1. Buds are found in the axils of leaves but not in the axils of leaflets, and 2. Leaves extend from the stem in various planes while the leaflets of a given leaf all lie in the same plane.
What are the steps of the scientific method?
Research scientists follow these steps. 1. State a hypothesis. 2. Design an experiment to prove the hypothesis. 3. Assemble the materials and set up the experiment. 4. Do the experiment and collect data. 5. Analyze the data using quantitative methods. 6. Draw conclusions. 7. Write up and publish the results.
What is germline therapy?
Germline therapy involves gene alteration within the gametes, eggs or sperm, of an organism. Alterations in gamete genes transfer the gene to all cells in the next generation. As a result, all members of future generations will be affected.
What is the largest group of insects that have been identified and classified?
The largest group of insects that has been identified and classified is the order Coleoptera. Beetles, weevils, and fireflies, with some 350,000 to 400,000 species. Beetles are the dominant form of life on Earth, as 1 of every 5 living species is a beetle.
Can two populations occupy the same niche?
According to G. F. Gauss, 1910 to 1988, an ecologist, two species that are in direct competition for the same resource cannot coexist if that resource is limited in some way. The work of Gauss and others predicts that under such conditions, one population will drive the other to extinction in that local area.
How are fungi related to soy sauce?
Aspergillus tumari and other deuteromycetes are used to produce soy sauce by slowly fermenting boiled soybeans. Soy sauce provides foods with more than its special flavor. The soybeans and fungi give soy sauce amino acids that are vital to human life. Fungi have been used in many cultures to improve the nutrient quality of the diet.
How are pearls created?
Pearls are formed in saltwater oysters and freshwater clams. There is a curtain-like tissue called the mantle within the body of these mollusks. Certain cells on the side of the mantle toward the shell secrete nacre, also known as mother of pearl, during a specific stage of the shell building process. A pearl is the result of an oyster's reaction to a foreign body, such as a piece of sand or a parasite, within the oyster's shell. The oyster neutralizes the invader by secreting thin layers of nacre around the foreign body, eventually building it into a pearl. The thin layers are alternately composed of calcium carbonate, argonite, and conchiolin. Irritants intentionally placed within an oyster result in the production of what is called cultured pearls.
What are the major achievements of biotechnology in the 20th century?
Date Discovery 1968 Stanley Cohen, 1922, uses plasmids to transfer antibiotic resistance to bacterial cells 1970 Herb Boyer, 1936. discovers that certain bacteria can restrict some bacteriophages by producing enzymes, restriction enzymes. Isolates EcoRI 1972 Paul Berg, 1926, splices together DNA from the SV40 virus NE. Coley, making recombinant DNA, shares 1980 Nobel Prize with Walter Gilbert, 1932, and Fred Sanger. 1918, 1974 Stanley Cohen, 1922, Annie Chang, and Herb Boyer, 1936, splice frog DNA into E. coli, producing the first recombinant organism 1975 DNA sequencing developed by Walter Gilbert. 1932, Alan Maxim, 1952, and Fred Sanger, 1918, 1978 human insulin cloned in E. coli by biotech company Genentech 1986 Kary Mullis, 1944, develops the polymerase chain reaction, PCR, in which DNA polymerase can copy a DNA segment many times in a short period of time. 1989 Human Genome Project. HGP, begins 1990 Researchers at National Institutes of Health, NIH, use gene therapy to treat a human patient. 1994 Introduction of first transgenic food, the Flavor Savor tomato. 1996 Dolly is cloned by Ian Wilmut. 1944, 1997 First human artificial chromosome is developed. 2000 Completion of the first working draft, 90% complete. Of the HGP 2003 Glawfish, the first genetically modified pets are marketed and sold in the U.S.
How is it possible to identify the genus and species of a plant based on its wood?
The arrangement of plant cells present in the xylem of wood allows for the identification of a plant's genus. For example, the wood of oak trees, genus Quercus, is dense and heavy because it has abundant fibers.